Alright, in this video we're talking about how to multiply and divide integers. So first we have 2 times negative 3, and I can think of that as two groups of negative 3. So if I want to use my number line, I could think about Cecil going backwards 3 two different times, so he would end up at negative 6. And you could also use the tiles if you want, so I could think of it as two groups of negative 3. So I have a group of negative 3 and another group of negative 3, and in total I would have 6 negatives. Alright, for the next one I have negative 1 times 4. And I can switch the order of those numbers if I want to make it easier. So I can think of this as 4 groups of negative 1. So again, with Cecil, he'd be going backwards negative 1 4 different times. So Cecil would go back 1, back 1, back 1, back 1, and he ends up at negative 4. Alright, same thing with the units, or with the positives and negatives. I can draw 4 groups of negative 1, and so in total, I would have 4 negatives again. Okay, so this one's negative 2 times negative 4, and this one's a little bit different, so I'm going to think about this. I'm going to ignore this negative out front real quick. So I have two groups of negative 4. So I have 4 negatives and then 4 negatives. But when I think about that negative, it's like saying I want the opposite of the two groups. And so the opposite of negative would be positive. So I'm going to make all these positive. And so then my answer would end up being positive 8 instead of negative 8. And if that doesn't 100% make sense, you can look up more explanations online, or maybe just trust me on this one. A negative times a negative is a positive, because you're kind of taking like the opposite of what we did, like in number 2 or number 1. So if I go back, I can see that a positive times a negative was a negative. And then for number 2, a negative times a positive was a negative. And for this one, a negative times a negative was a positive. And so there's that pattern we have. And the same thing is true for dividing. So if I had negative 6 divided by 2, that's like saying that I have 6 negatives, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I want to cut them into 2 groups. So I'll do a group here and a group here, and there's negative 3 in each of those groups. So my answer would be negative 3. So I can see that the same rules apply for multiplying that apply for division.